what happened was there was an important person in the town. He was like the representative of the emperor for the silk trade, and Suzhou is a big silk area. So the emperor's guy who goes there to buy silk is an important guy. Um, and his wife was sick, and nobody had been able to treat her to get results. She had malaria. So eventually they asked Gu Dehua to try, and she didn't want to go, like, no, no, please, not me. I don't know what I'm doing. But she felt compelled because he was important. And I think that his wife was somehow in the larger clan of hers. So she had good luck. She was shocked. Her medicine worked and the patient got better. And then they apparently the silk guy was telling all of his friends, and now all of his friends are trying to see her. They're really astonished, and like even men, she wasn't just treating women. Even men were coming to see her, and they were like high ranking, so she felt she had to.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Purple Cloud podcast. And we have a very special guest today. We have Lorraine Wilcox, who's been an incredibly prolific practitioner as well as translator and writer in the field of Chinese medicine for, I guess, a long time, and probably a number of decades now. Is that right, Lorraine?
I got licensed in 1988. So
Mm. So quite a while. And um, you published a number of books. I have your uh Chenjiao Da Chang, those translations, which happened a while ago, and there's been, yeah, just an incredible amount of stuff. And we're here today to discuss, sorry, you can't see that. I'm making me disappear, but it's, yeah, the medical cases from the Flower Charm Studio by Gu Dehua. And yeah, I'm really sorry, Gu Dehua, yeah, and I'm really just curious what attracted you to make this the focus of your next translation.
So a long time ago, 2015, I translated Tan Yun-shen's book, Miscellaneous Records of a Female Doctor. And it always has been the book closest to my heart, just because I really liked her as a person. When you translate cases, you get to know the person. While I had heard that there were other books by women doctors, I, didn't really have access. And I don't know, a year and a half ago, Michael Stanley Baker mentioned that Gu Dehua's book was available. So I tracked it down and just I translate all the time. It's just what I do in my free time, even if it's never going to be published or used for anything. And so I just started on it, and I found it worthwhile. And I found also that I was capable because I'm not capable of translating everything. Um,
Well,
and so I
she was
just
a
did
poet.
it.
She was a poet as well, as I gather, and I don't know how much of that made it into the translation. It doesn't seem that much, but that's always something that's quite challenging. Not so much poetry.
Yeah, I cannot translate poetry.
Yeah, it's another level. Yeah, but this has been a similar theme in some of your works, I guess, with this interest in, which is an incredibly overlooked area, female practitioners of medicine in the history of China. And you have this wonderful, it's not that long, but it's just a wonderful sort of introduction about the history and contextualizing all this kind of thing. Um, yeah, so yeah, I'm just curious what drew you in, like why you liked her. You said you liked her, and what drew you into this work? What sort of things?
I don't know. I mean, she's a real person. When you translate cases, often the personality really comes through. Some people try to be very formal, but I don't know, you still can see who they are. And she would talk about her failures. She'd talk about when she lacked confidence and was unsure, but the patient needed to be treated, so she'd do the best she could. She'd talk about when she had a sudden insight, a flash of insight. She seemed to have imposter syndrome at times where she really doubted herself, but then she had no choice, so she did whatever it took and was very surprised when she got good results. And so she just felt like a real person to me. And also I just think that women have been kind of pushed aside or ignored historically. And okay, we could talk about today, but let's not, at this time, it was really something that it I don't think it was unusual, but it just was kind of not talked about. Or if women wrote books, so many of them were lost, or nobody copied, nobody cared. In Tan Yun-shen's book, she worried that no, her great nephew worried that maybe she wrote more, but they'd been used to cover pickle jars because, they used to cover jars with paper and stuff like that. So that's kind of a saying to say that nobody valued it and it was just used as scrap paper later. And so that's what happened to women a lot. And I just wanted to bring women's voices forward and see if they had some different perspective on the medicine.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, you talk about this kind of thing quite a bit in that introduction I was mentioning, and it seems to be you bring in like some of these ideas of how women were conceived in the practice of medicine, and they seem to be almost yeah, the opposing kind of views at times. In that they'll say women are very difficult and women shouldn't be doctors, but also women should treat only women can treat women, but then they're not very good at it, kind of thing. So it seems to be just a hope that
Yeah.
it's this hopeless situation where like they're awful, but they should treat other women, but they're no good at it. That's kind of you correct me if I'm wrong. You've done a lot more reading on this subject,
No,
but it
it's
seems to
it's
be
basically they just were unhappy no matter what. The men the men were unhappy treating women and they were unhappy if there was a woman doctor there.
yeah,
So
so kind of a hopeless situation at the time, and it yeah, it's just like having these sort of voices is so important because it people do get a bit caught up, I think, in what's written down. And you make the good point of there is so much in the practice of medicine that hasn't been written down and was going on, and also some sort of pressed
it's
kind of
also
thing.
true we know so little about the lineage practitioners who maybe were even illiterate but passed down amazing
Mm,
traditions. And it's just hard to, most it wasn't really written about until the late Qing dynasty. Some people tried to, collect things from these kinds of practitioners. Literate people might try to collect things from those kind of practitioners, but we only get a certain amount of the literate medicine and not the medicine as it was practiced every day for the common people, really,
mm.
for the most part.
And you make this point of her say almost having imposter syndrome at times, which is really interesting because I mean a lot of in the Ming and the Qing, a lot of the sort of the later doctors get in these sort of terrific arguments where they're disagreeing with each other and sort of telling I'm right and this is the best way of doing everything. And there is not often sort of that kind of reflection or hey, maybe I didn't do this the right way. That doesn't in my experience doesn't come up all that much. So it must be quite refreshing to have that because as a practitioner and you've done practice yourself, that's something obviously people relate to. You see something that's not in the books and you have to think and you're not sure and you try something out and hope for the best. And yeah, that's something I think most practitioners could relate to.
You see her thought process developing. It's like, oh, I tried this, but it didn't work. And oh, but this thing suddenly gave me a clue. Maybe if I try that. And then she tries it and she said, like, wow, it actually worked. Not in those words, but
Are there any particular
Yeah.
cases you're thinking of when you're thinking of that?
Uh, I don't know. So maybe this gets too much into the weeds, but her book was hand copied during her lifetime. It was never published in her lifetime, which means there's multiple editions of it. And, some editions have like one volume and some have four volumes and some have six volumes. And it's just pretty chaotic. So, like, actually, so this book was done a long time ago, and I'm on other projects now. And so, like, remembering what's in the book, that was like a year ago. I was working on it, but I'm in a translation workshop. And so one of the things that we do is we translate stuff and then the teacher kind of corrects and we correct each other's. And so I've been working on some of the stuff from her, like other volumes that weren't in the already done book. So, okay, sorry. I info dump at times.
That's okay.
um, there's a case where um, somebody comes and knocks on her door and says, "Oh, my neighbor over there, his daughter is so sick and she's just everything he has, and please come see her. Please come see her." So she goes, just like gets up and takes off and goes, and the patient is having high fever and convulsions and this kind of stuff, and she's able to get her to eat a little watermelon that she's crushed up, because she's really dehydrated, and Shigua is like clearing summer heat and cooling and stuff like that. Mm, all the other doctors seem to have given up. There's a stack of prescription an inch thick, a tsun thick, that, all the other doctors gave up. So kind of Gu Dehua seems to be the last choice of doctors, but they just really want to cure her. And so anyway, she eventually writes a formula and um, goes home. And all of a sudden she thinks, this patient is on the verge of actually kind of having a delirious episode where she might even eat, like, broken, like break glass and eat it or do something crazy.
Mm.
Like, people in delirious states can do really bad things. And so there's like a thunderstorm just at that moment, and she sends somebody to run over there and warn them to watch her in case they're this kind of episode, and then it happens. I don't know. I mean, there's stories like, I love cases because they tell stories at the same time that they give the medicine. And I don't know if that's an example of what we were talking about, but she realized stuff later and sent somebody back to to warn the family. And this was another case where she was kind of like, oh, what do I do? All these other doctors have given up, and she figures something out. So I just like the stories too.
I think, especially by the time of the Qing, because the people can be a little bit more verbose. These stories, they can actually, they're not carving into sort of bamboo. They can be a bit more sort of ornate with their description and that kind of thing. Um, yeah, that you can get into these stories and they really, you have a bit more of a personality, and in that way. And these are also people who are contending with 2000 years or so of stuff written down like we are today. So I feel it's like much more close to how we practice today. You can start to sort of see similar kind of things, like you were just talking about that, but like a number of times I've written a form there and then 2 hours later I was like, oh, I should have put that in, or I should have done that, or constantly the tinkering. So it's really fantastic to do that. But let's take it back a little bit. Could you tell us a little bit about who Gu Dehua is, if you had to start from complete scratch, from someone, Chinese medicine practitioner perhaps, who doesn't know
So
anything about her?
she grew up in a region that was Suzhou adjacent at the time, but now it's part of Suzhou because cities grow.
Mm.
And she was the daughter of a local official who seemed to be well off, but never aspired to go, to high places. And so growing up in an area where women were often educated, at least upper class women were often educated, and she was a poet. She had poems published in a collection when she was in her teens. Somebody else made a collection and included her poems. She had a poetry teacher who was a friend of her father's, and um, a couple of things happened. She got really, really sick, and they thought she was going to die. She was sick for more than a month, and she was in a coma for a while, and she had some magical dreams.
Oh yeah,
One of
I
them,
saw
she's
this in the
walking.
book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
magical dreams happen a
love them.
lot to doctors. Yeah. Um, yeah. So anyway, in one of the dreams, they told her to switch doctors, and she did, and then she got better. And later, her father was really sick with who knows what it is, but it might have been tuberculosis or something, in modern terms. And she nursed him and nursed him. She was supposed to be extremely filial. And so in that time, she kind of got an interest in medicine, but she's still a poet. Um, but then she got sick later, which again could be tuberculosis. It was a lung something, and that could be passed on, of course, within the family. So she travels to some nearby town, and there's a doctor she wants to treat her, and she is able to rent an apartment next door with her husband, who is able to travel with her. This doctor not only treated her, but he would give them talks and lectures about Yang Sheng, nourishing life, and about medicine and stuff like that. And eventually they said, "Can we be your indoor students?" And he said, "Sure." So they stayed an extra year studying with him. And when they went back, were ready to move back, he told them to treat the sick and the poor, and to, be compassionate and to help people. Her husband, I think, had been already studying as a doctor. He definitely was a doctor, but when he started studying is not really clear. So he was practicing, and she was too shy. She didn't think she was ready. Women at that time were not, taught to go out and have a profession and do things like that. So, what happened was there was an important person in the town. He was like the representative of the emperor for the silk trade, and Suzhou is a big silk area. So the emperor's guy who goes there to buy silk is an important guy. Um, and his wife was sick, and nobody had been able to treat her to get results. She had malaria. So eventually they asked Gu Dehua to try, and she didn't want to go, like, no, no, please, not me. I don't know what I'm doing. But she felt compelled because he was important. And I think that his wife was somehow in the larger clan of hers. So she had good luck. She was shocked. Her medicine worked, and the patient got better. And then they apparently the silk guy was telling all of his friends, and now all of his friends are trying to see her. They're really astonished, and like, even men, she wasn't just treating women. Even men were coming to see her, and they were like high ranking, so she felt she had to. So I guess she eventually got over it and just started treating people.
Mm.
So
And
that's kind of her background.
and how has her legacy, all her writings, because like you said, some of them might have been, used to, they said used to cover pickle jars or whatever. How did they sort of reach us today, and why is there an interest today which led Michael Stanley Baker saying, "Hey, maybe you should translate this"?
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know that. I mean, she's not one of the four great masters of the Jin Yuan dynasties that has some brand new theory. She's just like a real person practicing medicine, recording it, and the the cases are somewhat interesting, and we can see. I mean, I can never aspire to be Judan Shi or Li Dongyuan, right? But I could aspire to be someone like her. Um, and it's realistic cases, and it's not so bound up in theory. I mean, she's definitely a Wenbing doctor, and she sees a lot of Wenbing. There were a lot of epidemics at that time and in that area, and she's in the same area that like Ye Tianshi and Wu Tang and all these people from the same area. But you know, maybe it's good for us to read the real geniuses who like changed the course of medicine, but I think it's also good to read about somebody that maybe I could achieve the level that they achieved,
Mm.
like something to aspire to as opposed to something that's just way beyond my reach.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. So would you classify her treatment style as like most, I mean, she's in the Jiangnan region, so it makes sense, but mostly when Bing kind of thing. She mentions a few Shanghan formulas, but obviously that's connected. Would you classify it in that
Yeah.
way, roughly?
Well, definitely if she sees malaria or summer heat diseases or whatever epidemic diseases, dysentery, she's a Wenbing doctor. But she also treats gynecology, she treats insomnia, she treats pain, she treats other things. And you're not going to use Wenbing to treat insomnia, you
Mm.
know? So um, she quotes from, Li Dongyuan and Zhu Dunxi, as
Mm.
I mentioned before. She quotes from, all kinds of the same doctors that, other literate male doctors would quote. Um,
Mm.
so she's well rounded, but she did have a lot of Wenbing cases,
Mm. Yeah, I think the
which
most
go
in,
well with Alan's book.
oh, right. Yeah, of course.
Alan's, yeah, Wenbing Chavian. She mentions that so many times. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting cases to me in there was the miscarriage case, which I think she uses, yeah, quotes from Li Dongyuan and uses Buzhong Yiqitang and that kind of thing. But I thought that was a really interesting case. One of the things she keeps emphasizing was that it is much more damaging to someone than a regular pregnancy, a miscarriage, and this kind of thing. And
That is
yeah,
something you read in gynecology books.
yeah, yeah. That's
They
really
always say when the melon is ripe, it falls off the vine. In other words, when a pregnancy is at the right time, it should relatively easily come out. Whoever wrote that never gave birth, but um,
yeah, probably a
yeah,
man.
um, yeah, yeah. But like a miscarriage, it means something is wrong. So actually, it can be more devastating. um,
Yeah.
and emotionally, but that's not what they were talking about. They were talking physically. Yeah.
Mm. They talk about, I think in this they talk about it damaging particularly like the pericardium and the pericardium channel and it drawing resources away from the heart. So that's I actually wanted to ask you whether you saw that as something more on the physical side or more on the psychological side or a bit of both perhaps, but you think it's more physical?
Uh, I mean, it's probably both, but one of the things about the women doctors that I've translated is that they listen to the emotions, whereas like all the men doctors say, "Ah, women are angry. Women are angry." That's just like all that they could see. But like Tan Yun Shen always talked about sorrow as well as anger. She talked about anger for sure, because women are angry. You would be too. But Tan Yun Shen could see the sorrow, and Gu Dehua can see, a spectrum of emotions and not just women are angry. So this is nice in women's writings is that women are listened to, taken seriously, their heart, their emotions.
Mm. And this is something you see as quite a big difference between the male doctors of the time and the female writings.
Generally speaking, yeah. I've I've finished translating, although it's still in the editing process, of another woman doctor named Zheng Yi. So that's going to be a book in the future. And then I've just found a fourth woman's writing. Her name is Sun Shi Tai. And so I was able to get somebody to go to a rare books library in Shanghai and to photograph each page. And I've been transcribing and translating it. And excuse me. And tomorrow I'm gonna be able to finally finish. Like I'm doing at least a page a day, and tomorrow I'll finish the transcription, getting it from OCR into Chinese without error, with fewer errors. I'm sure there's still some errors in. So I'm really excited about this last book. It's a bunch of case studies as well, and so now we'll have four books by women translated. So
Oh,
that's
good.
to me exciting. Yeah,
Yeah. And what sort of
I
so
know they
you
won't be, but sorry.
that's all right. Sorry, we do have a bit of a lag. I'll edit some of this out. Yeah, I just was going to ask what similarities and differences with these four works. We've mentioned some already, but I'm curious to explore this because you mentioned like the emotional stuff is a little bit and sitting and actually listening to women, which I think is still a huge problem today. Like I don't think we made a huge amount of progress in the medical system in that um, area. Some, but maybe. But I think it's still an issue. But yeah, any other sort of issues, any sort of similarities or differences you notice between these four books or four
I don't
writers?
know. Each of these women really have a totally different personality. I was thinking about this before, and like Tan Yun Shen feels like a mother, just really nurturing and caring. And Gu Dehua kind of feels like, I don't know, like she could be my friend and we could muddle through it together. And Zheng Yi, who's the book that I've pretty much finished, she kind of feels like a mother-in-law. Always bossing you around and telling you you better do it this and you shouldn't do that. And yeah, I don't like her personality as much, but like it's still a good text, you know. And I'm still working through this last one that I'm, finishing transcribing right as we speak. But she definitely is different than the others. I don't have a character for her yet, mother, mother-in-law, friend. I don't know yet who she is, but she definitely has a different feeling to her. It's another book of cases. So three of these books are cases, and then the mother-in-law, Zhang Yi, is more like a textbook.
Mm. In terms of these cases, um, are they mostly treating women, these people? And like you said, they're not gynecologists. They treat women, but you say this in the book, but they treat the whole spectrum of
Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
yeah.
So they're
Even
mostly
today,
mostly similar.
women want female doctors mostly. And
Hmm.
so back then, even more so. Um, so Tan Yun-chen seemed to only treat women. Probably she treated some of the males in her family, but didn't write about it, because there's an emergency and she's right there. Um, Gu Dehua definitely treated men as well as women, but in the volume I translated, they all seem to be women, or you can't tell. Some of these people could be men, but it's not clear. There's nobody who's certainly a man, but in the other volumes, I told you there were different editions of this. She's definitely treating men. Um, and Zhang Yi, um, it, the one that wrote like a textbook, the one that's like a mother-in-law, she treats her husband and her son, but it's unclear to me if she treats outside men. But I think that she did because before she got married, she actually opened a little clinic because there was like an epidemic. And so she was doing kind of public service, treating, public. So I'm sure she treated men when she had that little clinic for the epidemic that was going through. And this last one definitely treats men. The new one that I'm working on, Sun Shi Tai, she treats her husband, and I don't know about other men. I'm still working through it, but there are lots of cases where you don't know, like an insomnia case, you may not even, it may not be clear if it's a man or a woman. um yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I noticed is they treat a lot of family members. Like Gu Dehua has a big case on treating her mum for dysentery, her mother, and this kind of thing. And yeah, it's quite interesting, those personal type touches in there. And it seems to be in a number of these female writers, they're sort of very involved in the family and keeping their families healthy.
Since they were wealthy, they probably lived in huge compounds,
Mm.
with lots of people. um there are lots of times when Tan Yun-chen treats servants and stuff like that. So there are probably servants in the house she lived in. Um,
Mm.
but who knows? They could be neighbor servants. I mean, Tan
Mm.
Yun-chen treated a woman who was like the pilot of a boat. So she was probably out on a boat, and the woman's, said, "Oh, I'm exposed to wind and cold and damp 24/7 because I'm out here on this boat, so I have pain in my hands." And Tan Yun-chen treated her. So she must have been out in public and talking to the boat woman. Um,
Mm.
Tan Yun-chen also treated a woman who worked like in a where they were making bricks. Her and her husband made bricks, and she had heat from like doing all this work in the like by the kilns and stuff like that. So it seems like Tan Yun-shen was out and about. um Gu Dehua was definitely out and about, not stuck in the inner chambers.
Mm.
um it seems Suzhou at that time was pretty, liberal for women.
Mm.
Um, they
Yeah,
were allowed to do a lot of stuff.
it's one of the things I've really enjoyed on your YouTube channel and all this stuff is bringing these case, because you do a lot of these sort of case studies, and it really brings a lot of Chinese medicine to life. I think people don't realize how weird a lot of the practices or just some of the case studies are, and it really brings it to life. You really highlight a lot of the things that yeah, might not have been taught, or just makes it such a more colorful kind of history. So anyone who hasn't explored Lorraine's YouTube channel, I'd really recommend it, because it really opens up the wonderful world of Chinese
I
medical
like the
history to
weird
people.
cases, as you've noticed.
Me too.
Um, yeah, I like the weird stuff. Um, but I really, one of the things I always want to do is kind of visualize how did they practice, not just like what herbs did they use, but it's like I wish I could be just a fly on the wall in the clinic and see, everything. So I always try to visually picture what's going on and not just translate words. I always try to see it, because then it's more real in my mind and not just theoretical on paper.
Mm,
Um,
must be hard
that's
to
why I
get.
like cases.
Yeah, the difficulty with the translation is this balance between the linguistics and keeping everything grammatically correct, but also, like you said, getting into it, understanding the meaning, the nuance, like the environment they
Mm.
were writing in, and how to balance. I'm don't like doing that. I find it too difficult. So I
I want to
appreciate
give a shout
people
out to
like
my
you.
editor, Marnie Ergel. She's
All
just
right.
amazing. Although we have our little discussions where we strongly disagree on things. But, eventually we come to an understanding. But like, my writing would be like so much worse without her like cleaning it up and asking questions for things that either I took for granted, that needed explaining, or things that I hadn't thought of. And like really, like it's a pain in the butt to be edited, but it's so necessary and it makes it such a bigger book, a better book than before. So I'm very thankful for Marnie and Johan for, enabling all this to happen.
Yeah, shout out Marnie and Johan. There we go. Um, um, I wanted to ask it's if you could, perhaps, get into this some of the issues around regarding practice of female doctors and how females were treated. I'm wondering if you could sort of if you notice any similarities or analogs to how we practice Chinese medicine in modern day, if you see some similar issues and this kind of thing.
I'm not sure I really understand what you're
I guess
asking.
we
Um,
were talking about, how it's, for example, females weren't listened to or this kind of stuff very much or taken seriously. Obviously, things are probably a bit better today, but if there are some analogs in those sort of societal issues and the way women are treated, especially in the medical space, if you notice some similarities or
uh,
differences.
yeah, I mean, definitely it's so much better. Um, uh, I don't know. Sorry, I'm not coming up with
That's
an
okay.
answer instantly that's coherent.
That's
Um,
all right. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
no, it's okay. I mean, there's a difference between biomedicine and Chinese medicine, and each has its own culture. Um, and you know, I've been to Western doctors who really didn't listen, but I've also been to Western doctors that have been quite wonderful in
Mm,
listening. So maybe it's just a person thing. In Chinese medicine, though, I mean, at least in the United States, the vast majority of practitioners are women, but the vast majority of teachers and people who give continuing education, you know, classes, the people who are considered authorities are still men.
mm.
And on the one hand, I mean, that's the way society kind of is. But on the other hand, I think we as women need to step up. I say we, I don't, I'm not implying anything. Um, but, I mean, like, women just have to do it.
Mm,
But men sometimes just have to step aside a little bit.
mm.
So I don't know. I don't want to think about today. Today's so messed up in the world that
Oh,
like I'd rather go live in the Ming or Qing dynasty.
fair enough. Um, yeah. And, what about in America in terms of the patient base? Is that mostly female as well? Or it's probably a mix?
Oh, I want to correct something you said in the very beginning
Oh, please
because
go for it.
I haven't been a practitioner in a long time.
Oh, okay.
Um, when I graduated from school in 1988, I wanted to be a practitioner and I tried to be a practitioner, but there are a couple of problems. One of them is I don't really understand humans. Um, it's like people, I'm not so good at people. I'm better at like people who've been dead for a couple hundred years and I can translate them
Yeah,
than
you
I
seem
am at
yeah, you seem to
interacting with
understand them very
humans.
well. You seem to understand them very well
I
in the
don't know.
book.
I don't know. Um, but also I'm not good at dealing with money and I'm
Okay.
not good with going out and promoting myself. So like, I just didn't end up practicing just wasn't the right fit. But teaching and translating is something I like better.
Mm. And you've done all that fabulous work on the making of medicinals, which is really great. You brought a lot of that to the
That was
forefront.
fun.
Yeah, it's great because it's a
That actually
whole.
came from translating. The first stuff I started translating seriously was the Moxa stuff. And when I'm not saying I'm good at translation now, but I was much worse a couple decades ago. And sometimes I'd read something and I really couldn't understand what they meant. And I knew that if I didn't understand what they meant, that my translation wasn't going to be accurate. So I started doing stuff like trying to follow the directions from the Chinese book. And you know, so I started doing Mox's stuff in order to assist with the translation so I'd know what it looked like. And then I just started, liking the idea of researching how do you make stuff. Um, yeah, so
Yeah, it's a
there's
really
that.
underutilized field. I don't think many people are taught much of it other than throwaway kind of things. But yeah, it's a lot of fun and it's very useful in clinic. And it just, people are generally taught acupuncture and then sort of granules or boiling up herbs. But there is so many other ways of treating people, and I think you've explored a lot of these in the making the medicinals, but also I think one of my favorite ones was um oh, the name's escaping me. I know his name. I made everyone vomit in the genuine dynasty. The name's escaping
Oh,
me. You said he'd like
the
tie people upside down and swing them around a pole and
Zhang
stuff.
Zhe,
Zhangzihe, that's it. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I just,
So
who I love the
he's
idea that
wild.
oh, he's very wild. He's one of the more wild guys out there. But just to because I do practice, and just the idea that you you can get beyond this thing. Oh, it has to be acupuncture. It has to be herbs. The way you're treating. I mean, I'm not making people vomit by swinging them around a pole, but there are other things you can be doing that have a medicinal effect, and getting people beyond this realm of thinking. And you can be creative and maybe a little bit weird, and it's okay. It's part of the
Yeah.
tradition. And I think you've done some really great work to sort of bring this out there.
I just kind of worry that people will think, oh, Chinese medicine is so weird. Look what they're doing. Um, on the other hand, I just can't resist translating that kind of stuff and putting it out there.
Yeah,
So, uh,
yeah.
yeah,
And
that's fun.
yeah, a lot of it's fallen by the wayside, and I do think people get, they want to be taken seriously and be. So I do get that there's that tension there, but I don't know. I think you're doing great work. I enjoy all that stuff a lot.
That's good.
Yeah.
Not being a practitioner enables me to explore areas that if I were practicing, I'd probably want to focus on things that were clinically relevant at this moment. But I get to focus on weird stuff if I want to, because it doesn't have to be clinically relevant.
Yeah, some of it has dropped off, but it's, sometimes it's good to think about these old ideas that might seem weird, but maybe they work, and why do they work? And yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's very interesting. It's the color in these areas that just make it so much, yeah, more interesting and colorful and real than a lot of what people are taught in universities. So yeah, thank you for your work. I think it's fantastic, and
yeah.
it's yeah. Um, Is there anything else you would like to add? I'm just wondering if you have any courses coming up, anything to promote.
Not really, nothing in particular. I'm, I'm getting older. You may notice white hair and stuff like that. And I kind of really want to just focus more on translation.
Hmm.
I'm still teaching, but like I'm not making some big wild class or something like that. I'd just rather spend my time translating and, even if something never gets published, it's still what I enjoy doing.
Hmm.
So I don't have anything like that, but I do have like the Zheng ebook should be out maybe at the end of the year, maybe the beginning of next year. Um, and then I'm working on this other woman's book of cases. So
Mm,
it's just what I enjoy.
yeah. So this seems to be a kind of niche you've dug into for the next little bit, the getting all the female doctors out there, which is, yeah, very really valuable and super interesting.
But I don't know what I'll do when I run out of like books by women doctors. You know, I mean, there are 20th century books by women doctors that have a lot more, quote, integrated medicine stuff. And I'm not opposed to people practicing integrated medicine, but it just doesn't interest me. I'm more interested in like I don't know, there's no such thing as pure Chinese medicine, but like the Chinese medicine before Western medicine started being pulled into it.
Mm.
So there are definitely books by women doctors who are doing the integrated thing in the 1920s and 1930s and so forth, but I don't really think I'm interested. So I'm hoping that we'll find some other rare book that we can get access to.
So it's a bit of a limited pool to draw from.
Yeah, I might be done for that, but I'll find something else. I work on obsessions. You know, I had the moxa obsession, I had the medicine making obsession. Now I seem to be in the women doctor obsession. Who knows what the next one will be?
Well, I look forward to finding out what that will be. Um,
Thank you.
and I understand that there will be a book club discussing this book on White Pine Circle soon.
Yeah, we've set up, it's starting something like April 27th. I think. And so I think there's 7 sessions that will, you're supposed to read a certain section of the book for each. I think it's every 2 weeks. Sorry, there's a lot of, I think I'm not the organizer, but we should have fun discussing the book. And if you can't be there at the time that it's on, there's a recording and there's like a discussion board where you can ask questions or make comments. So a book club should be fun. I've never been in one, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it sounds great. I've not heard of these book clubs for Chinese medicine, but it must be, yeah, it seems like a very valuable thing to do to discuss all the different various elements of it and people chiming in with their own opinions and things. That sounds great.
They did Aaron Evans' recent book for their first book club. So I'm the second one.
How good. All right. Well, thanks, Lorraine. We might leave it there for today, but thanks for your time. And I would
Okay.
really recommend picking this up. It's a fantastic book. And yeah, I really got a lot from it.
Thank you.
Really got a lot from it. Thank you, Lorraine.
And I'm very grateful to Purple Cloud for like all the books it's been publishing and for your podcast. You had a bunch of really wonderful podcasts and then you were silent for a
Oh
while.
yeah, I got busy with
So I'm glad
clinic.
you're back.
I
Yeah. Well,
come back
that's
and
good.
forth. Yeah, yeah, it's hard to keep on
Yeah.
top of it, but thank you. I appreciate that. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.